Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Hey, welcome to the show. It's foggy today, huh? It's November 2nd. And ridiculously warm. And going to continue to be ridiculously warm. I just saw a video that somebody took as their car cleared the Fort Pitt tunnel heading into downtown. A view that any Pittsburgher adores, the pop of seeing our beautiful city emerging from that tunnel. And my God, any of you who went through it today, when you came out, you saw nothing. That's how the fog obliterated the entire skyline and downtown that close. It was just pea soup. Just saying. Personally didn't see it, but I in reality. All right. Well, I'm speaking of fog. I am a bit foggy myself. There's something about when your routine. I don't know. I suppose some people are better at rolling with changes, but I suspect the older you get, the harder that may be. And because I have another dog in the house and another human in the house, and the routine that my dog and I have has, hardly been interrupted, but interrupted just enough that my dog's a little on edge. And if my dog's on edge, then I get on edge. And I don't think we've been sleeping. And somebody pooped under the piano. I'm just saying. It wasn't me. Oh. Is this not the most beautiful autumn we've had in ages? It's just, breathtaking. And I keep finding excuses to be out in it. And when you think, well, it's not going to be beautiful tomorrow, everything's falling, we got it, and it still is. It's been amazing. This is me avoiding talking about news-oriented things. I'm at the point, this does happen to me, where I sort of am unable to understand how everybody is not in a full-blown panic. Listen to me. That's sort of where my head's at. Like, if I see people acting like normally, I think, what's wrong with you? Things aren't normal. Don't act normal. And I know that, I guess what you find out is that even in times, and I suppose you could ask a Ukrainian this, all of a sudden, one day they're living in their homes and country and everything's fine, and then the friggin' Russians start bombing them. And yet life goes on. I guess I had never felt that I was living in a country that was so on the edge. And I'm blown away by how life, so-called normal life, goes on. So that even if there's a essentially fascistic, nationalistic, racist, anti-Semitic takeover of the United States of America, life will go on. Oh, So, don't know where to start. I'm looking around. I got all this stuff scattered around in front of me. I'm looking around. What is it I'm going to land on here? Again, as is the case every day, the news is not good. I hate to tell you. Well, one okay thing happened, I guess. Bolsonaro, because I predicted yesterday he would not concede his loss in Brazil, and he sort of got in between. He is apparently going to relinquish power, so he'll do better than Donald Trump in that respect. But he too will not acknowledge his defeat. All these awful men. And you gotta be kidding me. Benjamin effing Netanyahu is back? What? Oh, what a vile piece of garbage he is. Oh my God. And that country, Israel, is about as evenly split, although it's more complicated, I think, is about as politically split as is the United States. So I'm wondering if I keep saying, well, look, these scary people in our country don't constitute more than, I always say, 40%. But why would I be saying 40% if almost every contest we see is pretty much 50-50? As is our Congress, 50-50. I mean, maybe that might be the result of gerrymandering and other things, shenanigans, which has given a minority of Americans, and I'm talking about Republicans, a leg up. You know, one of the things about Brazil, first of all, voting is compulsory. And secondly, this is startling, but I just found this out. Whoever gets the most votes wins. What a radical idea. Because we don't have a constitution and a form of government that agrees with that notion. Because Democrats are forever winning more votes, millions more votes than Republicans in presidential elections, and yet somehow the Republican takes office. Just one of the reasons we are in trouble. And I thought, correct me if I'm wrong, I thought the Pennsylvania Supreme Court was considered I know they're supposed to be nonpartisan, but it has a majority of Democrats. I thought it was supposed to be like a more progressive court. And if that's the case, then what the hell possessed the Pennsylvania Supreme Court to say that if a voter in Pennsylvania voting by mail forgets to put the date, not on the ballot, on the envelope, that vote will not be counted. Why? First of all, why would you need a date on the envelope? If the people who count votes have the envelope in their hand on election day, then obviously it was it was mailed or put in a drop box or handed in prior to the election. So what the hell would you need the date? Of course, you need the date because Republicans create these needlessly complicated ballots. Not the ballot per se, but the way you have to stick it in one envelope and then seal that, and then you've got to fill in certain blanks on the envelope. Well, lots of people, and I told you the story of my mother and my sister. It was my sister who screwed up. And you know, she's no dumbbell. It's designed to have votes discounted. Why would the Pennsylvania Supreme Court say that that was a reasonable constitutional restriction, a deal ender for a person trying to exercise their right to vote? You didn't put the date. Apparently, if you put the wrong date, that's okay. They just need a date. They put 1776. Maybe that'll pass muster. Unbelievable. Another court-related news, the good news coming out of the courts, is that, thank God, and I'm sure it'll be, here's the thing, it'll be appealed. But thank God, a judge in Arizona said, I don't think that people who are armed and wearing camo should be allowed to call themselves, election watchers. Actually, the group is called Clean Elections USA. Yeah, right. And intimidate, even take videos of people dropping their ballots off. So at least a federal judge in Arizona, and this was the result of a League of Women Voters suit against the absurdly named Clean Elections USA, because clearly what they're doing is an attempt to intimidate voters from voting. So we got one judge. And by the way, I love it when this is a parenthetical after you find out who the judge is. Michael D. Liberty, and he was one of the federal judges appointed by Donald J. Trump. I love it. Because he said, this is not cool. And it's not about the First Amendment rights of the so-called poll watchers or these camo and gun-toting patriots. Okay, so there was that. That was good. Pennsylvania Supreme Court, that was not good. What else do we have here? I'm so loath, you have no idea, to get into some of this stuff. I saw something. Oh, I mean, just a recommendation. I happened to have dinner the other night with a wonderful guy. I think he's been on the show. He is an expert historian of gospel music and especially the gospel quartets that were all over the place in the early 20th century up into the mid 20th century, and then essentially pretty much they flat out gave rise to rock and roll. And for those of you who might find that kind of musical history interesting, then I do want to recommend his movie, his documentary, which is now on HBO Max. And it's called The Way. Wait a minute. What's it called? It's called The Way They Got, How They Got Over. That's it. Sorry. God, always screwing titles up. How They Got Over. And it is, first of all, I mean, you treat yourself to just tons of this extraordinary music and then learning the history of it. And I happened to be reading a piece on Bob Dylan yesterday in the New Yorker, and just on the first page of a rather long article, talking about how Dylan, as a young child and a teen, and it was just soaking up every kind of American music he could get on his radio in his bedroom in Hibbing, Minnesota, and being able to tune into those 50,000 watt AM stations. And so even though he was in Hibbing, Minnesota, Bobby Zimmerman was like listening to these these guys. And they mentioned in the New Yorker article two of the groups that are in the documentary, the Dixie Hummingbirds and the Blind Boys of Alabama. Just amazing history and music, and I recommend it. It is a way of getting away and yet learning something. Although Jerry Zoltan, who is in the film, he's my friend, and he was from Pittsburgh and teaches at Penn State. Jerry, I wrote him after I watched it again, and I wrote him and said, I'm sure it wasn't your intent because it's not political, but everything is sifted now through my political perspective, my awakened political perspective, and the history that this documentary shows, and is enraging. I mean, to me, I know it wasn't the purpose of the film. The film is so filled with joyous expression of faith, and I was enraged when it was over. I was enraged because we don't know our history, because the wrong people get the credit. I think what enraged me is that the Jerry Lee Lewis obituaries My God, the New York Times had a full-page obit on this disgusting character, Jerry Lee Lewis. And watching documentary, you see that Jerry Lee Lewis wasn't doing anything that he had dreamt up. All the outrageous, the standing up, pounding on the keyboard, the jumping around, the crazy moves. They were all done before by black musicians. And in the case of one, and I don't know her name, I wasn't taking notes, it was a woman who was doing essentially everything that Jerry Lee Lewis gets credit for. He gets credit for being yet another white person to literally absolutely steal and get credit for the artistic brilliance of black people. My God, there was another woman named Tharp. She's playing a guitar. And this would be like early 50s, maybe late 40s, early 50s. She's playing a guitar. And if you close your eyes, you would think Jimi Hendrix. Now, at least Jimi Hendrix came from the same side. The richness of black. Oh, God. And speaking of richness, they got paid nothing. They got paid nothing. 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 And some refused. You had a chance of getting paid if you turned your back on gospel and went secular. And because then you might get played on some. I mean, that's what James Brown did. It's what Sam Cooke. He was in a gospel quartet, and they were looked at by the gospel singers as, apostates, but they made more money. It's interesting stuff. And it's just more of an indication of the thievery that passes for American history. Oh, there was a great quote from one of the guys who was going to leave the gospel circuit and head into the more secularized circuit because, there was more money to be made. Not a lot, but more. And he said, it's really, you don't have to change much anything. He says, you just take where you say the Lord, Lord, and you change that to baby. Oh, baby. Instead of, oh, Lord. And that's pretty much what they, did. Well, just saying, that's something you could maybe treat yourself to. How they got over. Wow. Why do some people think of leaves as something that needs to be gotten rid of right away. I mean, I want to do a quick defense of leaves. Leaves on the ground. They're beautiful. I have one of those tactile, actually auditory and tactile memories from my childhood of walking through leaf-strewn streets and loving it, just loving it. And the people who there's something ludicrous to me about a lawn in this time. Oh my God. Guys, I have, this is a little embarrassing. There's someone at my door that I do have to. I know. It's okay, Stella. It's okay. Hey, hi. I'm doing a can't. Yes. Thank you. Hey, it's okay, Stella. Okay. Sorry, guys. Okay. Oh my God. Somebody having to get into my yard as I'm talking about yards. There's something grotesque to me about a totally green. It's okay, honey. It's okay. Yeah. A totally green lawn. When the lawn's on each side and the sidewalk is, do you know what I mean? It's like, what? And I'm thinking there are people, you can tell, that consider a leaf on the lawn some kind of it's out of place. It's a desecration. Why, it's litter. I don't know. So, forgive me. So the Post-Gazette, Pittsburgh paper, sort of, kind of, the Pittsburgh paper that the workers are still on strike, guys. The Post-Gazette endorsed Dr. Oz, which is just mind-blowing. Because I happened to also the other night be with the former political cartoonist, editorial cartoonist for the Post-Gazette. That'd be the great Rob Rogers. He was at the same dinner with Jerry Zoltan. What a bunch of wonderful people were there. And I was, Rob, of course, was a victim of John Block's ultra right-wing conservatism, and his cartoons were regularly quashed because they were deemed too difficult on Donald Trump. And eventually, of course, he was terminated. However, they turn around and somehow I was talking. I'm sorry, I've lost my train of thought because I'm sorry, forgive me. There's people swarming around supposedly. What is she doing? I have tree difficulties. Oh God, I hate this. So anyway, I was saying to him, I was shocked that of late it seems as if the editorials in the PG are actually more liberal, and I often find myself agreeing with them. And we talked about that and why that was and blah, blah, blah. But then right after I say that, I think it was the next day that I see, they endorsed Oz. Yeah, he'd be a fine senator. I can see endorsing Oz. Why wouldn't you? A fine representative of Pennsylvania, right? What a, what a, I mean, it's just grotesque. So I noted that Chris Potter, formerly of actually the Post-Gazette and Pittsburgh City Paper, noted this endorsement and as he so often does, nailed the irony of the endorsement. Because one of the things they said made them not want Fetterman was that Fetterman has, and this is the quote from their editorial, Fetterman has lived off his family's money for much of his life. And so the assumption being, of course, that he's just a little rich kid and he's never held down a real job. Everything he's gotten is a result of his privilege, his money. Well, Potter said, I don't begrudge or even care about the PG's endorsements, but I did get a laugh out of a newspaper owned by the brothers Block, objecting to the fact that a candidate has lived off his family's wealth for much of his life, seeing as that's what the brothers Block have always done. God almighty. So I guess the Federal Reserve is going to raise those interest rates again. But at the same time, story after story after story, if you're reading, shows that these companies that are jacking up prices, the food companies, the restaurants, Target, everybody, all the prices being jacked up, and they have all these great excuses. Well, you know, the pandemic. Well, you know, the supply chain and forced us to. And, well, you know, the war in Ukraine. And, yes, inflation and the price of this and jacks up our prices. And all you see is all of these corporations making money hand over fist. And saying it's because of inflation and, supply chain and all this kind of stuff, when it is their greed, their profiteering. Headline today's New York Times, food prices soar. And so do companies' profits. Yep. But it's Biden's fault, so let's just keep it real. Speaking of food prices, I want to thank Susan. I think is it Susan? Who's not my sister, who sent me this piece from the Washington Post, and it's a rant that I have done before, but this one was particularly really well done. It's written by a 64-year-old guy who wants to know why, even though he's retired, he's somehow become a grocery store worker. And he asks the question that most of the sheep of America have stopped asking. They just get in line and do what they're told. He asks, why do I have to ring up my own groceries? Why do I have to bag my own groceries? Why do I have to be yelled at by this disembodied voice nagging, please put the item in the bagging area. Please put the items in the bagging area. And he says, you know, this is spreading. It's not just grocery stores. He says, apparently, I now have a job at the airlines, too. At United, I now book my own flight. I tag my own bags, and I drop them on the belt. This is true. He says, I also have just acquired part-time jobs at Target, CVS, McDonald's. I mean, I am checking myself out more often now than a 7th grade girl on TikTok. Is that not a great line? I think that's really the line I wanted to share with you. I'm checking myself out more often now than a 7th grade girl on TikTok. And of course, this is all about pocketing more money by the grocery chains because they're firing people who used to do that. The cashiers, the baggers. Often quite clearly the kind of jobs that people that didn't have necessarily a big skill set or weren't inclined to want to work in those jobs would take. But he points out something that I have to admit I have pointed out as well. You can cheat it. And that's why they have people watching. They have people watching. I've never had anybody ask to see my, like leaving Costco or one of those places where before you wheel your stuff out, they want to see if what's in your cart dovetails with what's on your receipt. But this is happening as well at these stores that make you do all the work and then essentially treat you like a thief. And I am sure that plenty of people, and it's easy to do. I have done it. I did it just the other day. I had a little piece of ginger root and I had 2 shallots. And I'm sticking the ginger root down and then I'm doing produce lookup and then I'm I'm going through all this stuff for something that apparently by the time it was done, it was 33 cents. I looked at I just picked up the ginger root and the shallots and threw them all into the bag. I thought, you just stole. And I thought to myself, no, you didn't. You know what you did? You took some compensation for this job that you're doing that you didn't ask to do. And what I said in my rant years ago when this stuff started up, hey, if they're going to ask us, force us to do the work that they used to pay people to do, then they should give us a discount. So if you do self-checkout, you get whatever percentage off. That at least makes some sense. And I am hardly alone there are tricks. Okay, I got these organic bananas here. I put them down. I don't tell the machine they're organic, which probably means they would cost more. I tell them I got bananas, right? So it's little things like that when you're self-checking out, you can do. And I wouldn't begrudge anybody He points out that the good folks at Walmart, knowing this is going on, have installed ceiling cameras that track your hands. That track your hands. And they're prosecuting customers for not being good employees, I guess. And he points out, so the next time you see that Walmart greeter waving, I don't know, they could be waving for a police officer. So there you have it. And I mean, obviously, the battle's lost, but I do believe in guerrilla activities of efforts to stage protests by stick a shallot in your pants. Jesus. All righty. I have a caller. Okay. I'm sorry. I just saw this. I hope they're still there. Hello.
Okay. Real quickly on the ballots. The tolerance between the ballot. You hear me okay?
Yeah. Better.
Then? Okay.
Yes.
The tolerance between the envelope that contains the ballot and the external envelope you have to put that one in is so small that if you have arthritis or some problem with your dexterity, I can see how some people would just end up saying, fuck it, because I'm reasonably nimble with my fingers, and I can't tell you how many bends and folds and rips were caused by my trying to get that ballot inside the other one. Yeah. And you would think they could just make that external envelope a little bit bigger.
Well, I think the purpose of all of it is to trip people up. It's jumping through hoops. And if you trip on one, well, tough.
That's right.
It's unbelievable. Right. It's really unbelievable. Yeah. And I don't know how. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. You please.
No, okay. I was just going to say, but yeah, you're right about that, and I wasn't going to ask about anything else, but since you mentioned it, do you know what Fetterman actually did before he became the mayor of Braddock? Because I've heard some people say that he was a state parole officer for a period of time, but I really don't know what kind of work he actually did before he got into politics. Do you have any idea?
Well, I believe, I think he was with the kind of group. I think the way he went to Braddock to do the kind of, do-gooder work, working for I don't know which exact NGO, non-governmental organization he was working for, but he was doing the kind of work like domestic Peace Corps kind of stuff.
Okay.
Which would also mean that he was not making money, and he was relying on his rich parents to support him. At least he wasn't being a jerk. He was trying to do some good work.
Right. Well, I remember him back when he was advocating for, when UPMC tore down, Braddock Hospital, and he was very involved in, the protests against that. So he's a good guy. I voted for him. It's sorry to see him, his current condition, but he will recover. Yeah. And he will be perfectly capable of doing the job. God forbid Oz wins that election. So that's all I had to share with you.
Well, I'm totally in agreement. Thank you so much for the call.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye. Yeah, and you see that I did miss on the court things. The Chief Justice, John Roberts, bought Donald Trump a little time with his tax returns. You'll recall he was the first person who ran for president who refused to let the American people see his tax returns. And he's still managing. He got friends in high places, really high places. God almighty. Okay, so I have another recommendation for you, and this one would require you buying a ticket, and I'm hoping there's still tickets. If you want to blow yourself away, I'm not, I got to tell you, I'll be there. I wouldn't miss it for the world. At the August Wilson Center this Saturday, November 5th, there is a one-man performance called Frederick Douglass Now. I have seen this online, a video of another performance, and I was blown away. But it ideally and is a performance that you need to be in the room. The guy who does this, Roger Guenver Smith, is an amazing actor, writer, director, and he's here just for the night. He has collaborated with Spike Lee on a number of other movies, including one that won the Obie. Well, because I guess that was on Broadway for a little bit. A Huey P. Newton story. He does these Black historical figures, uses their words, and creates an event that is mind-blowing, just mind-blowing. And so I really, really, really recommend it. November 5, this Saturday, 7 p.m. It'll be incredible. I want your socks knocked off. This would be the way you could definitely do that. Frederick Douglass wrote a letter to his slave master, to his former master. And he wrote that letter in 1848. And it wasn't the only letter he wrote him. He kept writing this SOB letters. And they are so powerful. And they make up, obviously, part of this performance. He actually, at one point, says to the former owner, his owner, I intend to make use of you. One can only imagine that white SOB reading these letters. His name was Thomas Auld, Auld. 'Auld. And Douglas said to him, I am your fellow man, but not your slave. Again, like the documentary on black music, gospel music that I was talking about earlier, this is performance that is educational, yes, entertaining, mind-blowing, and really, really important. So I know that there's a great deal of history in it about our Constitution, about Lincoln. And I think even at one point he says, and this dovetails with the music documentary I was talking about, he says about white people, they love black music, but they hate black people. So come on out. Yeah. If you're looking for something to do on a Saturday night to feed your head, to feed your soul, to support great black performance, that would be a good idea. I have been wanting to share with you, and you know what? I don't think the time's going to work here. Oh, yeah, it will. Yeah, it might. I came upon a screed written by a right-winger, an erudite right-winger named John Daniel Davidson, in a respectable right-wing rag. And it is chilling, because in it he calls on fellow conservatives to own up to the fact that their movement has failed and needs to be reconstituted into a revolutionary movement. Now we're starting to see this sort of like high-toned intellectual foundation of the new American fascism. And as I said, this is not, it is respectable. Let me share just a little bit of it with you. This is what I had been wanting to do. He says, his name, by the way, John Daniel Davidson. He says conservatives should stop calling themselves conservatives because the conservative project has largely failed, and it's time for a new approach. And he's saying, the reason he's saying conservatism has failed is, well, I'll let him speak. What have conservatives succeeded in conserving? In just my lifetime, he says, they've lost much. Marriage, as it has been understood for thousands of years. The First Amendment. Any semblance of control over our borders, a fundamental distinction between men and women. All of this we failed to conserve. Western civilization, he says, is dying. The traditions and practices the conservatives champion, well, they're lost. And he says this, the left will only stop when conservatives stop them, which means conservatives will have to discard outdated and irrelevant notions about small government. The government will have to become, in our hands, in the hands of conservatives, an instrument of renewal. And in some cases, a blunt instrument, indeed. Sort of like a hammer to an 82-year-old man's head. He gives examples of what the new Republican big government will do. Stop universities from spreading poisonous ideologies, and it will require state legislatures, of which the party already controls more than half, to starve these universities of public funding. He talks about stopping the disintegration of the family by reversing the travesty of no-fault divorce and getting rid of subsidies for families, combined with generous subsidies. Oh, all of a sudden they want to subsidize families, intact families that they consider families, a man, a woman, and little blind children, generous subsidies for them. And then he says, wielding this government power will mean a dramatic expansion of the criminal code. It will not be enough, for example, to reach an accommodation with the abortion regime, to agree on reasonable limits. An unborn human life can be snuffed out with impunity. We will have to outlaw completely the barbaric practice. And then he says, he cuts to the chase. This is how this thing ends. I've excerpted it. Radicalism, not conservatism, is what is needed now. Radicalism is precisely the approach needed now, because the necessary task to be done is nothing less than radical and revolutionary. To those who worry that power corrupts and that once we were to seize power, we too would be corrupted, they certainly have a point. If conservatives manage to save the country and rebuild our institutions, will they ever relinquish power? It's a fair question, and we should attend to it after we have won the war. For now, there are only two paths open to conservatives. Either they awake from decades of slumber to reclaim and refound what has been lost, or they will watch civilization die. There is no third road. Okay, there you have it. And that, as I said, is sort of the more high-toned, intellectual Republican/fascist statement of what is necessary. Scary times. All righty, guys, that's it for me. I'm getting out of here. I'll be back tomorrow because, well, I've gotten into this rut. I just keep doing it. And hope you'll join me. Enjoy this day. It looks like the fog's lifting, and it's going to be another beauty. Enjoy it. And I hope you'll join me tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Lynn Cullen Live. Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.